The Stackathon is a little riff on hackathon, where essentially one crowdsources the generation of ideas and solutions for big problems, right? So Amplify has a really strong audience. Like it has quite a few people coming that are very strong brokers, strong digital adopters, and generally, really knowledgeable, intelligent folks. Like everybody in the insurance business, but that specifically these ones coming are really experienced. They've done a lot of innovation. They've done a lot of things that have worked and some that haven't worked. And so they're bringing with them a really strong base of knowledge, and we want to tap into that to help each other, but also to help other brokers who potentially wouldn't have attended.
Perfect. So can you give us a little highlight on what actually is going to be showcased throughout this event?
Sure. So some brokers will talk, well, people will talk about, what's your tech stack? And actually took me a little while to figure out what that even meant,
Yeah.
to be honest, a few years ago. And really what it boils down to is, what technology to use for what functions. So what the Stackathon is meant to do is to break down all of the functions and processes and procedures that brokers undertake in their daily business and identify what the best set of technology is for brokers in those various functions. So we'll look at things like the new business flow, policy change, lead generation, all of those different elements that make up a broker's work processes, and then we'll identify what is through the audience participation, because I don't know what the answer is. The good news is the audience has already tried this, and the answers will come out of it. But we'll be then looking at what is the best piece of technology for this element of a new business workflow and that element of a new business workflow, and what's the best accounting approach, what is the best like I said, lead generation or policy, client retention approach as it specifically as it relates to technology.
That's amazing. Can you discuss the importance of collaboration between technology vendors that will be at the event and insurance brokers, and what the main goals brokers should take away from the event?
Sure. So there's been an explosion of technology vendors in the insurance sector in the last, call it 5 years, right? So some years ago, there was really just the main BMS vendors and a few additional vendors here and there. But now, IBAC recently added another sort of vendor forum to its setup, and we are focusing on they want to call them insurtechs or fintechs or startup vendors or whatever you want to call them. There's we identified 20 or 30 somewhat established or some or mildly established or new vendors that are out there providing services to brokers. And I would say, I'm in this space. I generally speaking know what's going on in this space. Even I didn't know a lot of these vendors, right? There's so many new vendors out there. There's so many vendors that have done something and now they're doing another thing or a different thing. That it's almost impossible for everybody to know exactly what the state of play is in the insurance technology sector, in Canada. So part of what I think people get out of this is a much better understanding of what these vendors do and what the opportunities are for brokers. Right? Every one of these vendors is trying to make some aspect of a broker's business better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you don't know about it, or you don't, have if you only know a little bit about it, you're not going to be able to take best advantage of it. So, the vendors will be there because they want to help brokers understand what they do, and brokers will be there. And the Stackathon is essentially targeting this explicitly, is figuring out how best to integrate all this new and great technology that's being developed by new players or established players, and how that best serves the broker channel.
Amazing. So how did you envision this Stackathon, and how did this come to fruition to be held at Amplify?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I can answer it. I think it came out of just conversations I've been having with brokers and carrier representatives and whatnot, just talking about different things that have come up and what's best, and brokers arguing. Obviously we have the Digital Insurance Point podcast with Steve and Adam and Jeff, who are heavily into this space, and even they will debate different tools, or somebody will come up with a tool that the other guys weren't familiar with. And so it kind of struck me that, well, who actually does know the answers? And I realized, nobody actually. But if we get, 100 or 200 smart, forward-thinking brokers together, that the power of that group will definitely come up with a significantly better answer than any one person could.
Yeah, for sure. So that leads me to my next question, actually. Brokers that are attending Amplify, what kind of advice do you want to give them on how they can get the most out of this event and the Stackathon, and what they can go into it thinking about? And
yeah, so the way to get the most out of it is participate in the hackathon and put their cards on the table, right? It strikes me it's almost like when you were 8 years old and you had baseball cards, and you're talking to your friends, you're like, oh man, I've got this player, that player, whatever, and you go through this whole got him, need him kind of situation where I'll come to the table and say, oh man, my lead generation is awesome. Look at my results, and somebody else will say, yeah, but your retention is terrible, and here's what I do on retention. Here's the tools that I use, and then you can both learn out of that, right? You can find somebody who's got strengths where you have weaknesses, and vice versa. And
yeah,
by trading these ideas, putting them on the table, discussing them, going through the proof points, convincing each other that what you're doing is better than what they're doing, and come up with the best outcomes when you add it all up together.
what I really love about everything I'm hearing about the event and how this is coming together is that we've got so many different vendors that normally might be competitors or deemed to be competitors, but we're going to have brokers that have a different need for each. Their tech stack might operate better in a different way than some of their peers because of the way their business operates. So I think there's space at this event for all of the vendors to show how they can play, better with different things. Like I don't want anyone to feel like the event is a winner takes all kind of
No,
mentality.
it is that. I mean, even if that was attempted, that would fail, because there isn't that, the winner takes all. That winner doesn't exist. There's no
Yeah.
vendor that does everything, number one, right? And there are certain pieces of technology that fit better with other pieces of technology. So there's a bit of a it's multiple choice at the end of the
Yeah.
day. There are things that will come out as fairly obvious for different pieces, I think. So I guess in theory, vendors are always thinking about what makes their brokers better, because their brokers at the end of the day are their clients, who pay their salaries. So, but I would ask them to double down on that and really think about not just the totality of their tool, but how it fits into the different elements of a broker's workflow. How does your tool improve new business from a broker's perspective? Are you focused on more growth? Are you focused on more efficiency? Are you focused on both? Right? Think about it from that new business perspective, from the service perspective, from the renewal perspective. Do you do something that focuses on helping people through a claims issue that might be a net new feature for a broker? So really put yourself in the broker's shoes, think about where your technology best fits, and be ready to articulate that. And because brokers will be coming and asking about that, right? So the way the process is going to work is the brokers have a chance to talk about this amongst themselves. They will quickly realize they don't know all the answers. They will have an opportunity to go and talk to vendors who need to be really ready to articulate what those benefits are in a way that resonates with brokers.
So I guess the vendors coming into this have to think about the event different than the typical trade show at a convention where they're just handing out pens and pamphlets, and actually use this as an interactive, you know, avenue where they get to spend dedicated time with us with a smaller but more this is their key audience. This is the people that they really want to get in front of and have those dedicated conversations. And it's not the typical event that they're used to.
No, correct. At a convention, you have principals and staff and people, middle managers and whatever. At the Stackathon, it is going to be primarily decision makers. It is going to be that people that actually make the call, write the check, and then have the responsibility of implementing whatever that software is back at their office. So yeah, it's a significantly higher percentage of decision makers that are going to be there. So the way of interacting those people is going to be very different. It's going to be very much about what is the bang for the buck? What's my ROI? What specifically do you do? Where does it fit? How do you interact with these other tools? And you know, it's going to be quite a bit different, and it's going to be a lot more intense. Yeah, a few less people, but I think it's going to be more intense than a typical convention.
100%. And you brought up a good point there. You know, the how does it fit with the other tools? You know, the integration between the different technologies, they're all going to be there. So we can actually have those discussions of, okay, how do you connect with the guy down the hall, or how do you connect with the booth next door? Because I want to pick and choose all of them together. So it's going to be really interesting.
You may have the world's best lead generation tool, but if it doesn't integrate back into the broker managed system that I happen to be using, and therefore I have to do double entry, well, that's a big negative, right? So, you know, that kind of thinking, how does my tool work, but how does it work in the context of my business is at least as important a point that needs to be brought out.
Right. So we want to get brokers to leave with an understanding of their complete A to Z, not a chunk here and a chunk there, but their whole entire process flow.
Right. And I mean, I think it could be both. Like, I think you may have brokers come in there saying, listen, my retention process is rock solid. I know exactly what I'm doing. I have a weakness over here. So there might be some brokers coming saying, I'm open to redoing my entire tech stack. And there might be some saying, you know, there are elements of my process or my tech stack that I really want to sharpen. So I think both of those things can be true, actually.
That's true. That's true. So let's talk a little bit about IBAC. What kind of role does IBAC play in supporting technological advancements within the insurance industry, and the role that you play there?
Yeah. So IBAC, you know, essentially was founded as an advocacy group, and primarily for many years has been very much about advocating with, you know, with government. And a number of years ago, actually before my time with IBAC, Peter Braid, who's the CEO, and the board of directors decided that they would open a second sort of major element around broker technology. And that's taken a number of forms over the years. And you know, the focus that I've been putting into it for the first few years is around specifically around connectivity between brokers, broker management systems, or broker technology in general, and carriers, right? So every broker has got many portals, and there's double entry, and you know, which has an impact on efficiency, which has an impact on customer service. So those are the kind of things that IBAC is trying to lead the charge to address, right? So IBAC is not a technology shop. We don't develop any software, but what we do try to do is to work with CSIO, work with vendors, work with carriers to try to encourage the development of connectivity and you know, better technology in general, but specifically around connectivity, and so that we can actually get to the end goal of having data flows without human intervention between brokers and carriers.
Awesome.